guys, welcome back to another video. This week I'm glad you guys are back for a brand new recipe. This week we're going to be making some pork meat and green sauce with some verdolagas. This dish is super delicious and easy to make. It's one of my favorites, especially because it has the verdolagas in it. Verdolagas is sort of like spinach. It also has almost the same taste to it. I highly suggest you guys try verdolagas. You can find it at any Mexican local store. It'll be on the produce aisle. I usually find it where the cilantro, epazote, spinach leaves, and all those greens are at. If you can't find the verdolagas, this dish is super great by itself, just the meat and the sauce. And you can substitute the verdolagas for some potatoes if you would like. Before we get started with this recipe, I just want to remind you guys to please subscribe to your channel. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Share with your friends if you loved it. Comment down below with any other recipes you'd want me to make next. Remember, we upload videos every single week. And now on to the video. For this recipe, we're going to be needing two kinds of pork meat. For the first meat, we're going to be using pork without bones. And for the second meat, we are going to be using pork meat with bones. Make sure you specifically get the pork meat that has bones in it. 4 little bunches of verdolagas. And the verdolagas look like this. They come in little bunches. It has a long stem and leaves at the top. About 1 pound of tomatillos. I'm going to be mixing the tomatillos between the tomatillos milperos and the regular green tomatillos. I suggest you guys getting the tomatillos milperos because they have a better flavor. We're also going to be using 2 jalapeno peppers, white onions, and 2 garlic cloves, a little bunch of cilantro. And for the spices, I'm going to be using some cumin, whole black pepper, and cloves. We're going to be adding this to our blender whenever we're going to be making the sauce. And to get started on our recipe, I want to make sure I prep everything first, especially when I'm mixing meat and veggies, where I'm going to be cutting them both. I like to cut the veggies first and then the meats, just so you're not cross-contaminating everything. Because if you're not really careful with the meat can actually get you sick if it's raw. So we're going to get started with the verdolagas first. I'm going to be snapping off the rubber bands that are holding the verdolagas together. I'm going to also be cutting out the ends. Watch out on the ends because some verdolagas actually still have the root on it. So make sure you remove the root. After that, we're going to be cutting our verdolagas into 3 chunks. And this is sort of what a verdolaga looks like for the leaves. Like I said, it tastes really similar to spinach. And you can find it at any local Mexican store. We're going to continue the same process with all of our verdolagas. Cutting out the rubber band. Taking out the ends, make sure it doesn't have any roots on it. And then splitting it up into 3 chunks so we can continue with the process. After our verdolagas have already been cut, we're going to continue cutting the meat. If you go to any Mexican store, to the carniceria, when you ask the guy to give you the meat, make sure you say carne de puerco sin huesos. Sin huesos means without bones. This is so we can also have some meat into the dish, because the other type of meat that we got, it's mostly going to be bones and very, very little meat on it. We will be cutting the chunks of pork into smaller pieces, and we're also going to be removing some of the fat. We also want to leave some of the fat in the meat so it can give it a bit of taste and flavor to our dish, but majority of the fat, we're going to be removing it. We're also going to be starting to cut our carne de puerco con hueso. Con hueso means with bone. Majority of this meat will be mostly just bones by themselves. As you can see, it has a big old bone in the middle and a little bit of meat surrounding the bone. For this, we can't cut it down the middle, obviously, because of the bones. So we're only going to be taking the fat that's around the meat. The reason you want the bones in this dish, it's the bones gives it a lot of flavor to the meat. So that's why whenever I make this dish, I make sure that I buy meat separately from the bones. I get those 2 types of meat just because in the past I have noticed that the meat that comes with the bones is very, very minimal. And myself, I like my dish to have a little bit more meat on it. So I buy 1 pound of each, and it's a perfect amount with the bones and the meat. Now not that we have everything cut together, we're going to be putting it on the pan, and we're going to be adding a little bit of salt, covering it, and we're going to put it on the stove on medium to low heat to cook. We're not going to add any water or oil to this dish. The meat is going to release this juice and it's going to cook evenly. After about 15 minutes, this is how our meat looks like. All the water has been evaporated for the meat and it's starting to sizzle at the bottom. At this point, what we want is for our meat to fry. So we're going to be adding our tomatillos to cook on top of the meat. You can also cook your tomatillos on a separate dish, but I have found that adding your tomatillos on top of your meat gives it a bit of flavor. So we're going to be spreading the tomatillos around the meat and we're going to be covering this for about 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, your tomatillos should have already changed color. Even if it's just a slight change of color, you want to remove them out of the heat at this time and add it to the blender. Just because if you continue the process of the tomatillos cooking even longer, they're going to explode. and they're gonna release all the juices inside of your meat, and you don't want that. Now that we have already taken all the tomatillos out, our meat should be still in the pan, and the tomatillos did release a little bit of the juice into my meat. So I'm just gonna let this here fry for a little bit to evaporate the juice that the tomatillos left. Meanwhile, in our salsa, we're going to be adding 2 garlic cloves, a little piece of white onion, the 2 jalapeños, or you can also use serranos, the little bunch of cilantro, and the spices, which is the cumin, whole black pepper, and cloves. We're going to be adding 1 cup of water just to help the blender blend everything together, but the less water you use, the better. We're going to close this up and we're going to blend it for about 3 minutes. Now on our stove, the water should have already been evaporated from the tomatillos, and on your pan, your meat should also be sizzling because it's frying the meat. At this time, we're going to create a little hole in the middle of the meat, and we're going to add a little bit of vegetable oil. Let that vegetable oil heat up for a couple seconds, and then we're going to add a little bit of diced onion. We want the diced onion to saute for a little bit before incorporating everything with the meat. And now that our diced onion is semi-sauteed, we're going to incorporate it with the meat, and we're going to let this fry for about a minute. Adding a little bit extra oil to your pan is going to help the meat saute even more. If you did not remove a lot of fat on your meat is going to release its fat naturally, so I don't suggest adding any more oil to this dish. After about a minute, we're going to be adding our verdolagas. Previously, your verdolagas should have already been washed and rinsed, but your verdolagas are still going to be a little bit of wet. So make sure you be careful when adding your verdolagas into your pan because water and oil don't mix well. At first, it's going to seem like you have a lot of verdolagas in your dish, but your verdolagas are actually going to be shrinking down. It would be like spinach, as I said previously. Spinach bulks up a lot of space at the beginning, and then at the end, whenever you're done cooking it, it shrinks up. So it's the same thing with the verdolagas. We're just going to saute the verdolagas for about a minute, moving it every now and then. About 3 minutes later, my verdolagas have already shrunk and they have already been fried. As you can see, it's way less than what I started off at the beginning. And we're going to be adding our green sauce at this time now. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to my blender to get any extra sauce that it got stuck on the walls. I'm just going to be adding a little bit just because the tomatillos have already released enough water into this dish, and I don't want it to be very saucy. We're going to mix this up, cover it, and let it boil for about 5 minutes to get everything incorporated together. After 5 minutes, we're going to uncover it, mix it up just a little bit, and we're going to taste for salt. For my dish, I did needed a little bit more salt, so I'm going to be adding just a little bit of salt and a little bit of chicken flavor bouillon to give it a little extra kick of seasoning into this. But if you would like, you can only use straight up salt or chicken flavor bouillon. Remember, we did add salt to the beginning of our dish with the meat, so always taste first before adding anything else. We're going to mix this up again to get all the salt incorporated into our meat, and we're going to cover this and let this boil here for another 5 to 10 minutes. While I was making the verdolagas, I was also making some red rice that I'm going to accompany the verdolagas with. If you want this red rice recipe, I'm going to leave the link to that video on the description down below. About 10 minutes later, I'm going to check on my dish. The meat and the verdolaga should have already been cooked, as well as the tomatillos. So now what we're looking for, all the flavors to incorporate together. We're going to taste for salt again, just in case we missed a little bit of salt. And for me, this dish is done. It's perfect on salt. So we're going to cover this and turn off the heat. And this is the end result for our dish. Like I said, it was super easy to make. I highly suggest you guys giving this recipe a try. And if you can't find verdolagas in your local store, I suggest substituting the verdolagas for potatoes. It would be the same process. Instead of adding your verdolagas into your meat at the beginning, you're going to be adding your potatoes, letting your potatoes saute, and then adding the sauce. And with the sauce, your potatoes should be able to finish cooking. This dish is very delicious. It's one of my favorites to make, especially anything that's green sauce related. I love anything that's green sauce. And I always accompany this recipe with a side of red rice or beans if you don't like red rice. Super healthy because, like I said in the past, the verdolagas have like a very spinach flavor to it. And it's a fun way to incorporate vegetables into your dish if you don't want to eat just straight up vegetables. So this is the end result for this week's video. Don't forget to give it a big thumbs up if you liked it. Share with your friends if you loved it. Leave me a comment down below with any other recipes you would want me to make next. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you can be part of our family. Remember, I upload videos every single week, and we'll see you guys next week with a brand new recipe. I hope you guys have a great week and a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye!